I want to focus this conversation on three components of the project that I'm going to be talking about, and that is crowdsourcing, data ingestion pipelines, and transitional data structures. Oops. Okay, but first off, what is the Klezmer Institute? We are a digital first organization, and we are founded to support Ashkenazic expressive culture. And what is that? Ashkenazic expressive culture is, broadly speaking, the physical expression of European Jewish culture through music, song, and dance. We have discovered that one of our specialties, an area of work for us, is to work in the digital humanities. And we're also finding a place as a connector between academia and academic pursuits and what we call scholar practitioners, or the larger community of people who play and are interested in klezmer music, Ashkenazic expressive culture. The sort of scholar practitioners who are a huge part of this community. And then to connect, and that our organization is intended to serve as a support structure to help that community. There are many organizations that support klezmer music, but we are adding ourselves to that group of folks. And we're also specifically interested in making links between the academy and our practitioner community. And so that puts us in kind of an interesting place, because our primary audience is our musicians. That's oftentimes the first audience that we think about, because that's kind of where we come from, and that's who we're serving, and they're the primary audience for us. Like they're the first audience of our work product, of the things that we do. And then close second, parallel, also academic researchers, but musicologists, folklorists, historians, and so on and so forth. And then the last part of this is that we don't have an academic affiliation. We are not associated with any institution or a museum or an archive or a university, which is it's just a distinction that we have that many organizations don't have, and it leads us in directions it has led us in some very specific directions that I'll talk about shortly. So I'm going to talk about the Kiselgof-Makonovetsky digital manuscript project, talk about what it is, where we're going, and then we'll get to the methodologies. First, very briefly, I want to describe the inputs to this project, and I seem to have shuffled my slides. The project that we're talking about is called the Kiselgof-Makonovetsky Digital Manuscript Project, shortened slightly by the acronym KMDMP, or I will refer to it often as the Kiselgof Project. And what is this? This is we're looking at a portion of materials that were collected during the Ansky expeditions between 1912 and 1914, with some key historical figures: Joel Engel, Zisman Kiselhoff, Shlomo Rappaport, Ansky, I.L. Peretz, and they were members of the St. Petersburg Historical Ethnographic Society, and whose work was supported by Baron Horace Ginsburg. Who, like as for many great ethnographic projects, the first thing you do is you go find a sponsor. And then just I'll slide through these. These are just some images from the expedition, and Ansky himself, having organized this project to go document, as many folklorists were doing in this period. He and his cohort and his colleagues, were seeing modernity rushing in, and they thought they better go out and examine and collect folklore before it was too late. But he had a lot of trepidation about this, as he expresses in this letter, about being a city slicker, a sort of sophisticated city slicker at that moment, far away from his roots in the Städtlach. Some more pictures. And these will be familiar to you. These kinds of pictures are very familiar to you as folklorists. They just happen to be some from the Ansgi expeditions. So here we are, developing this project. In the summer of 2017, there was a fateful meeting in Tokyo with our ethnomusicologist friend Walter Zev Feldman and a very delightful young woman from Kiev who was studying computational linguistics in Tokyo, as you do. And they rode on the subway together, and the upshot of this was that in the summer of 2017, Anna Gladkova-Rogers went to Kyiv to the Vernadsky National Library of Ukraine, and she acquired for research 850 photographs of original handwritten musical manuscripts from the Ansgi expeditions. She did this in collaboration with, a number of different people, and I won't describe the details of that, which are available elsewhere. But the key thing that she added to this project as a philosophy, in addition to having acquired the material, she agreed to give them to us, the Klezmer Institute, a brand new baby institution that had only been, we'd only existed, well, in 2017, we didn't even exist. But we were imminently going to exist. And she agreed that we could work with this material on one condition. And that was everything all at once, available to everyone right from the very beginning. And her condition to hand over the stick with the data on it was that we had to make sure that whatever we did, that we released all of those images and all of that material first, right? Rather than saying, well, we're going to work on this, we're going to edit this, She's like, no, if you're going to do this, it has to be this way. And so we took that as the first principle for the project. And so we designed our project to speak to that imperative. And then as a brand new baby organization that nobody had ever heard of, and that we were still thinking through what it was going to be, we had also had some pretty profound limitations. One is that in order to do the project, we had to be able to do it and not have it cost anything, because we didn't have any money. And we didn't know when we might be getting money, but we basically didn't have any. So we had to plan it as if we didn't. We also wanted to make sure that people who wanted to come into this project would have very low barriers to entry. And then, of course, free access to the material. And so let me just describe very briefly what it is that we thought that we were doing as a project design, which is that basically we got this material. And we thought, oh, we should make it digital. We need to make it digital and make it available for people to use. So we were figuring out how to do that. We had to make the barriers to entry for participants to be low, and we had to make since we couldn't give money to pay people to do this, we had to give a different kind of exchange for the labor that we were asking people to put in. And the thing that we thought that we could do is to make the outputs available immediately, for people to use. If you're a musician, digitizing a score, if I digitize one score, like, you would have the potential that, like, you would also, if 10 people digitized one score, then all of a sudden you got 10 scores. And so we thought we better make it so that people could get those things very quickly. And then the design was to be a community-driven project that would center the folks who we knew already would be our primary creators of the work and consumers of the work. And so that had to be at the center. So what is the corpus? The corpus is 26 notebooks of handwritten music, approximately 650 pages. We have Moshe Beregovsky's handwritten catalog in Yiddish describing those first notebooks, those 650 pages. We don't have all of the notebooks, but we have 26 non-consecutive notebooks from out of 72. Apparently there are 72 notebooks. We have 26 of them that we're working with as images. And then we have the catalog of that material. And then we have an incredible Klezmer manuscript from one individual author. His name is Kiselgof-Makonovetsky. That is approximately 230 pages. So 850 pages in total, approximately 1,300 melodies. The melodies themselves encompass instrumental klezmer music. The majority, the quite vast majority, is instrumental klezmer music, but we also have liturgical settings. We have some songs, and we have some what we call nigunim, so wordless melodies of with spiritual content. You know, they have they're not just dance music per se, although they can be dance music, but they have, and there's an intention that they have sort of a divine connection, or they inspire those kinds of connections through performance of them. So you can see this is kind of what the material looks like. Makonovetsky's manuscript is this incredibly precious resource because he was writing to another ethnomusicology collector. He was writing to Moshe Berdigovsky, and he writes that he had written out his whole repertoire for Berdigovsky, so that Berdigovsky could understand his music. And he said that, you know, his original manuscripts had been destroyed and you wouldn't be able to get anything out of them. So he took it upon himself to recreate his own repertoire for Berdigovsky, and he included instructions. There's a tremendous amount of extra material there, like this one you would play for the first Mazaltov. This thing you would play for the neighbors or the aunts and uncles. Here is musical chairs in Yiddish, right? So it's an incredible resource. But that said, you know, as many of you will be familiar as folklorists, you know, what are the challenges? You know, we have very little contextual information inside of our pages. We have to look outside for the context. There are many different, aside from Makonovetsky, we have many different notation authors, because these are manuscripts that were written by musicians for musicians. They were written by them for themselves. And so the team just collected the stuff. So we have inconsistent and idiosyncratic notation conventions. We have very expansive repertoire, all kinds of repertoire, huge amounts of different kinds of repertoire, which is great. And then on the books themselves, we have many different annotators, you know, and we've attributed to Kiselhof or Kiselhof students. We also attribute to Berdigovsky as he was going through the manuscripts in order to write his catalog. And with regard to orthography, we have pre-YIVO Yiddish, right? Non-standardized Yiddish. And we have pre-revolutionary Russian writing. And so we have three, you know, we have you know, Yiddish, Hebrew, Russian as the primary languages that we find on the pages, with a little tiny bit of Ukrainian. But that in itself, the textual elements as annotations, as marginalia, and as the catalog are themselves like their own sort of mini project in here. And so what did we want to do with this material? We wanted to reproduce all of the music notation in a machine readable format. This is to serve, you know, this is now to be available for computational musicology, for sort of musicological study, things like that, but also for some very basic things like, I want to change the key that this melody is in so that I can take it to my community band, right? We wanted to reproduce the text and annotations in a Romanized form and Romanized transliterated forms, both from Russian and from Yiddish. We wanted to not only transliterate and Romanize the text, but we also want to translate into English, since the majority of the members in our community are mostly English speakers. And then so then the big thing is that this corpus, working on this corpus of 850 pages, is a test process. It's a testing case. It's a test case for a larger project called the Klezmer Archive Project, which will be the subject of a different talk. But Klezmer Archive Project, in brief, is the design of a digital humanities tool, archival tool that will document everything, available information about klezmer music, including, the music as notation and sound and images, traditional catalog information, corpus specific metadata and about the items specifically, and then semantic metadata that links items to performers, and that links community performers and other people to each other, with the last layer being the facility, the ability to add commentary by contemporary folks about each of these items. Like I said, that's a much bigger long-term project, but this is our sort of testing ground for some of the ideas that we're going to be integrating into that tool. And then the last outcome was to sort of do community building around this topic of this music, right? Because for us as musicians, this is a window into the past. It's a direct link between klezmorim of the early 20th century to us today, because it's extreme, and on that level for musicians it's been extremely exciting, because you really feel like you're able to connect with these folks in the way that we think of ourselves as musicians today. Like I have a notebook where I wrote down tunes that I wanted to remember 20 years ago, that is almost exactly like Motorreder's notebook, except the content is different, but the idea is the same. And so there's a lot of it inspires a lot of sort of deep connection for the people that are participating in the project. And that has made possible the crowdsourcing component. So a little bit about our community, which I can only speak to my community, and I know that there are communities of affinity in many of these folklore disciplines. I mean, I've spent some time in the Irish music community and the American Appalachian old time music community, and I see a lot of similarities to those communities. But I'm just going to describe briefly our community as I know it. So international klezmer community is very broad. We did a 24-hour concert with I think we had 70 acts from all around the world, including Australia, Chile, Brazil, Argentina, all kinds of Japan, so there's people who are interested in klezmer like all around the world, very many in Europe and very many in North America, as you might expect. And this includes people who are interested in klezmer music, who are singers of Yiddish song, dancers, and then just sort of Yiddishists, broadly speaking. However, at the present moment, klezmer is something of a high barrier to entry community in a lot of ways, in the sense that there are not a huge amount of currently available resources for newcomers. Right? If you want to get into klezmer, there's some key books that people and key recordings that are sort of always mentioned, but we have not yet developed the kinds of resources that I think we all recognize that we need now to bring in musicians and instrumentalists who don't find klezmer, who don't already know that they love klezmer music, right? There's not a lot of great resources for violinists, for example. There's some, and they're great. There's not quite enough yet, and so that's something that we are seeking to change. However, those who are in, and they're in deep. And this is a community that really is invested in sweating the details. And we have people in the community who are like, single human archivists of tune connections and history and recordings and so like this. So the people who are here have kind of overcome a moderately high barrier to become insiders and to become experts. And because of that, we felt we were able to design a project that would draw upon those folks to participate in the work of digitizing this corpus. The last thing I'll mention here is that, like many folklore communities today, the folks who play klezmer and who do klezmer bring with them also lots of other kinds of expertise. You know, there's doctors and lawyers and students and computer programmers and, you know, like name your profession. And there's somebody in our community that probably does that profession. And so when we are drawing from this area of expertise around klezmer music, we're also sort of getting this larger community of expertise that is also essential. It's essential to the organization of the community, even if it is not necessarily to the organization of playing a klezmer tune. So back to this topic of how did we do it? We used Google Forms to bring people in. We used Google Sheets and Google Drive, and lots of Google Sheets. You can see I've got them twice. Should be Google Docs, Google Drive, and Google Sheets. And the idea of the sheets was to really just basically, I set up a really basic infrastructure that would allow us to just take Berezovsky's catalog and translate all the text, to romanize it and then to translate it into English. I had another sheet that was for tracking the work on the Heften. The Heft is the Yiddish word for notebook. And so I set up a spreadsheet that was basically just tracked everything that had to do with all of the items in each of the different notebooks, including, we gave everything a number. We came up with a numbering system, and then we had, you know, who had an intention to digitize, and then who did digitize, and then sort of people, there were spaces to take a stab at transliterating and translating any annotations and marginalia on the text. There was also space for if somebody was like, oh, this reminds me of blah, 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 they could write down what tune that tune reminded them of, or if there was a connection to another tune in the Heften. So another big part of our project, another big kind of core design thing that we did, is that we decided to be platform agnostic with regards to music notation. And what I mean by that is that we were asking people to digitally notate a melody, and we thought that that ask was enough, that if somebody was willing to do that, we didn't want to also ask them to learn another music notation program, right? So what that means is, for the music folks in the room, you know, MuseScore. So we have scores that came in using MuseScore, Dorico, ABC notation, Finale, Sibelius. I mean, you name it, like we have all of them. And so that decision, and we knew it was going to cause us problems, you know, or issues, but we decided that it was worth it. And I think we still stand by that decision, that it's worth it to like say, if you want to engrave something for us, great, use the program that you have, and we'll deal with that on the flip side. And so what we asked people to do, they used a Google form to upload their scores, and we would ask them for a PDF so we could see what it was supposed to look like in its original idea. We asked for the native file format, whatever program they made it in, and we asked them for a music XML interchange language, uncompressed music XML. And so all three of those files get uploaded together through our Google form intake. And the PDFs are turned around immediately and put into a public-facing folder so that you can access from our public website. You don't have to register with the project in order to access the PDFs of notated music. You also don't have to be registered with the project to access the images of the Heften. You know, so if you want to look at the original Heften, you certainly can. You can get them all right from our website, and you can now also get the musical PDFs right from our website. And as of now, I think we have like 1,150. Like we're within spit and distance of being done with the whole corpus, which is awesome. So the multiple file formats that I just described about the PDFs and the music XML. And so then I'm going to show some slides in a minute that are going to talk about this, because the Google Sheets I was able to set those up. The original Google Sheets, I made them and I put them up. There are a few more than those, the catalog and the Half Mac sheet, but those are the two main ones that people work in. Actually, I'll also mention this. We made another sheet that was a translation wish list. So that, you know, say I'm really big into notation. So I was like, I'll notate a tune, but I don't speak Yiddish and I definitely don't speak Russian, but I want to know what's on the page that I'm notating. So people could take a screenshot of the thing that they wanted to have translated, and they would upload it into a cell on the Google sheet of the translation wish list. And then we had a really amazing person who would just check in every week, every few days, they'd check in, and then they would just translate it. And this was a person who speaks both Russian and Yiddish, so they were able to really do almost everything, basically. We also had in the beginning, we had a music symbol list that was a similar Google sheet where people could take a screenshot of a piece, like a music notation thing that was weird and they didn't know what it meant. And then we would sort of pile in and sort of try to come up with a solution for that. We also made a sheet that pulled out the textual and the liturgical material, because for people who, there's not so much of it, and for people who are interested in the song and the liturgical material, like they're kind of not interested in all the rest of the stuff. So we wanted to make it easy for people to find those specific items. And so one of our community members sort of developed that sheet. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk about how we like the next step after the Google Sheets, and those are the Integromat workflows, and then now we're moving into a new platform called Coda. So I'd like to just ask a poll in the room. Are any of you in this room familiar with the automation program Integromat or Make? Have any of you ever used this program before? And you could just either put in the chat, or Emisha, you're gonna like tell me if anybody raises their hand.
No.
Okay. Okay, great. So I learned really quickly. So we set up a Google form. We set up a Google form to take in these scores. And then I would go through and sort of manually put them put the PDFs in the PDF place, and I would put the XMLs in the XML place, and And then I just quickly realized that we had sort of set out a desired like file naming convention so that there would be consistency across the naming of the files. And it became almost immediately clear that like that was really just not, like, everybody has their own way of interpreting file names. And it became overwhelming, and particularly when it came to updating a file that had already been done. Like, we wanted to make it possible for people to submit a notation and then go back and say, oh, I made a mistake. I want to add some more material and more information, so they could update their file. And we wanted to keep those revisions so that we would have version control on any updates. So I was getting overwhelmed, and my colleague Max Rothman from the Klezmer Archive Project, who is a Klezmer, he's a violinist and he's a really wonderful programmer. He looked around and he thought it would be a good idea for us to automate some of our file processes. And so he helped me develop a workflow that would take the Google, anytime a new row was added to the Google form, Integromat would see, oh, it would look every 4 hours. It would look, and if it had a new row, it would trigger the scenario. And the scenario, sort of basically in short, it would take the files and it would pull information from the form, and it would rename the file according to a very strict file naming convention, which is the KMDMP number, the name of the tune, if there is a name, and the name of the person who did it. And then it would send it through this stream, like I'm showing you part of the stream. And it basically, what it would then do is it would, if on the PDF stream, it would look to see if there was already, if it was a new file, it would put it into the new community folder. It would make a copy, it would keep a copy, and it would make a copy and put it in the community folder, and then it would keep the revision forever. If it was a revision, it would do the revision thing. It would like keep a copy, make a copy, download the thing, upload the thing, keep the revision forever, and then move it into where it was supposed to go. And then, because Max is smart, he had a thing where it was like, there's more than one answer, or there's an issue, or there's a problem, and that would send it to a Slack. That would send a notification to our Slack channel that was dedicated for errors. So this, like, it took us a while to figure out how to do this, because we were trying to work with all this Google Sheet stuff, but like it revolutionized, it changed everything. It made it totally possible. This is sideways. Like, imagine this 90 degrees, but this is a screenshot of the whole scenario for the score intake forms. And it has, I think, a total of 72 modules in it. And, you know, so that just sort of speaks to the complexity of the things that we were trying to do, but also, but also the complexity of trying to work with Google Sheets and, you know, trying to get, you know, just trying to keep it cheap. That's basically what this is all about, is trying to keep it cheap, trying to keep it free. We pay, I think, $9 a month to have this Make, the company is now called Make, to have this automation scenarios run. And we have unlimited scenarios that we can run. The last thing down at the bottom, if there was a song or a thing, we shifted off into also a separate song liturgy folder for liturgy folks. And then at the very, very end, it sends some emails. It sends emails to the person who uploaded the score to say, hey, we got your score. And it sends a file to us that says, hey, we got another score. So those integrations have just been revolutionary for us. So this is the score processing one. We have also a new participant registration form that has like 14 modules in it that like gives people permission on the Google Forms, and it does this, it does that. It's like a little razzmatazz that it does. But once again, it just saves me having to sit down for an hour, you know, to get everybody in the right place. So for us, this has been like an incredibly successful process. We were recently awarded, I'm very grateful to say that we've been recently awarded a National Endowment for the Humanities grant to plan a scholarly edition based on this Kiselhoff material. And initiation of that grant project, sort of, it's a symbol and it's a signal of us moving into a new phase, and moving from the sort of raw intake part of the data collection for the corpus, because into a editing and processing part of this thing, because as we've invited members of the community to digitize scores, and probably, I would say, there's probably at least 50 people who have notated a score and contributed at least one to our project. I think there's about 50, maybe 60. And then we have a few, like 10 to 15, like really hardcore people. Like we have one person who's notated more than 550, I think, out of the whole corpus. They've done basically half of the work themselves. But even so, you know, we were accepting any incoming score, figuring that we would do the editorial pass later, which is now what we're doing. And now that we're getting into this editorial pass place, we've realized that Google Sheets are entirely insufficient to manage that task. And so so we did a bunch of research, and once again, looking for a low cost platform to do the next phase of the work. And we've settled on a company called coda.io, which is a relatively new company. Once again, it's sort of a business automation platform. But what they do if you're familiar with Airtable, Airtable allows you to create relational databases. Basically, you know, it's like a big step up. It's a big conceptual leap up from Google Sheets. Airtable, we tried Airtable. Airtable was great. It turned out to be too expensive for us. We couldn't afford it because our base table has probably 1,400 entries in it, and that blew through their limits, you know, before we ever really even got started making extra stuff. So Coda, their thing that they're advertising is that it's a way to combine documents and tables all in one place. And they have the relational database capabilities that you would imagine from Airtable. Plus, I think they may even do some extra stuff, but I'm kind of new, so like I can't speak for what they do. But what I can say is that as I'm showing you this view, what I can get from Coda actually is even better than Airtable, actually, because I looked at Airtable, and there, from what I saw, and I only parachuted in there for a hot minute, and before I parachuted out because I ran away because of the cost. Airtable, in my experience, did not give me a lot of flexibility in the layout of forms and tables and stuff like these kinds of views. And Coda, so far so good. It's allowing me to show, as in this screenshot, I can have the Yiddish. This is a page from the catalog sheet, where I can have on my left-hand side the Yiddish. I can have the transliteration. Things are a little bit, I obviously need to do some correcting on this. Things are a little bit out of order, but you get the idea that I can put in a column Yiddish, transliteration, and English, and then an editor can come through and they can be working on these things all in one place. And we can add tick boxes for who's worked on it, what's been done. So like this. And then the other thing that I'm able to do in this space is take the big giant catalog sheet and combine it with a view. I can make a view, I can make a table that combines elements of the catalog worksheets and the HeftMac sheet all in one place for the first time, which is very exciting. And then the next thing I know that I can do is I will also be able to add the file locations of the PDF of the music XML and of the native scores. They can be linked here, and I will also be able to serve up links for III. We now finally have a IIIF server up with the original images of all of the Heften. So I think within the next few months we'll be able to serve an image to at least an image link. Like, I'm not sure about serving an image, but we'll at least be able to serve an image link right into this space so that you can click on it and then go in another window to see the image, which of course for the editing process, like, that's great. You know, eventually, like, the text can be edited here. This platform does not yet support right to left text typing, but we are working on it. We are asking for them to do this one simple trick to get right to left typing available. But then the other thing we're going to be doing is we'll be taking the music and putting it into MEI and be able to make annotations in MEI, and theoretically the link to the MEI can also go into this space. And the ultimate outcome of that work, you know, so now we're kind of just gathering everything together in one place so that we can come up with a reasonable workflow for the editorial pass by a smaller team of probably, like, I think in the end of the day, we'll have about 15 people working on the editorial pass. And we have funding to do the planning for the scholarly editions, and I think we'll be working on developing those workflows in this period, and then we'll be looking for funding to sort of support the actual, you know, the real sort of grindstone work of really going through all of the pieces and getting them available, so that, because eventually we want to be able to put the whole data set into a GitHub, you know, so that the whole data set is available to anybody who wants it. I have been reluctant to put it out there without at least one basic editorial pass on it, just because I don't really want to put out, I don't want to put out bad data. So that's it. So the risks that we face, the project is funding. Obviously, that's a big concern for us, because we are having to, we are supported by the people who have invested their time and energy into the project. We don't really want to ask them for money too. And we do ask them for money, but like it's enough. It's enough that they give us their time and energy. We have we've gotten some grant support, and that's been great. We're always looking for more. We don't quite have access to the kinds of institutional grants that you would get as part of an academic university. But at the same time, we're also not that kind of a project, because this isn't a project that was sort of the idea of one person and then it's going to result in like a PhD or a book or a product of that nature. This is a project that really wants to make its outputs available for research, and that we will be doing research ourselves, but is mostly the output is, I guess the output is the data set itself, and the output is the community around the data set. And what I mean by that data set is, to put it back into human terms or folklore terms, is to put it back into the hands of the people for whom it was created in the first place, right? We feel very close to the music. And so, like that's the direct connection, is finding ways to take this material that was created by musicians for musicians and make it available to a whole new generation of musicians to work with and enjoy, and for their Jewish communities to also enjoy and engage with, and for their not Jewish communities to work with and engage with. This doesn't have to be, there's no reason why this has to be limited to any one community of affinity, because it's great music, right? So further risks, editorial control and quality of the work, and that's kind of where we're at right now, is working on that. We have worked very hard, when you're doing a crowd project, you have to keep things interesting, to keep people engaged. And that's, for us as administrators, that's always the challenge. We did these massive, mammoth, our first event was a 30-hour Zoom marathon with 2 Zooms running for 30 hours straight. And that was a way to get everybody in and just start swimming around in the stuff. And we did a bunch of those digitize-a-thons, and we're shifting into a new phase with that. We're doing more performative type things. Technology challenges, that's kind of what I've been talking about, is, how for us, how to keep the costs down, while still filling the needs that we have. And we've been extraordinarily lucky to have technologists in our community who are willing to donate their time to help make those workflows come together. There's no universe in which I could have made that Integromat workflow. But it was about, I don't know, maybe he put in 15, probably about 15 hours of work to get that together. Maybe it was a little bit more. So for that amount of investment of time, it's been extraordinarily productive. The last piece is the durability of our data and infrastructure, and I'm going to leave that one to the side. I think for now, our goal is to get everything into a GitHub, and then to, as we grow the Klezmer Archive project, we're going to be looking for building out the kinds of institutional connections that will allow us to have a sustainable data set for the long term. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there. And just put a hot minute. If you want to look at the project, you can see us at klezmerinstitute.org, and KMDMP is the acronym that will get you into that front page. And if you're interested, you can register for the project, or if you're not interested in registering for the project, but you'd like to talk to me about it in any way, you can write to me directly, and I can take you on a tour of what we have, if that's something you're interested in.